Hello, everyone, and welcome to the leadership podcast called My Great Aunt Edna, the leadership show that focuses on excellence, doing things the right way, no shortcuts, and accountability. I'm your host, Mac McNeil, and this week I am truly excited about my guest. We have a lot in common. We just had a conversation, and we have so much more in common than I initially knew. So I want to introduce everyone to Grace Young Foster. And Grace is the CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. And she's changing the future of work for adoptees of color. And she's also a Foster alum herself, which makes for a great story. So with that, I want to turn it over to Grace. Grace, thank you for joining the show and welcome to My Great Aunt Edna.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. So I want to start out with, before we get into what you're doing right now as a founder and CEO, of your story. Because I find it intriguing. There's also something else I didn't tell you about myself. I'll tell you here shortly afterwards. But can you tell me a little bit about your background, your childhood at this point?
Yeah. Okay. My story. This is always a challenge to really express in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But really in a snapshot, I am an adoptee, a transracial and transnational adoptee, which means I'm an adoptee of color that was placed into a home that did not reflect my race. And I'm transnational, which means I was born out of the country and brought into the US to be adopted. And I was born in South Korea, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I was found and placed into an orphanage when I was about 3 years old. And I spent a couple of years in the orphanages in South Korea. And a family in the US, in the Midwest, wanted to adopt me. So they brought me over at about 5 years old. And I was placed into their home. They had biological kids of their own. This is really common for a lot of adoptees that are adopted from countries like mine, like Korea and parts of Asia, and there's so many, but they wanted to quote unquote complete their family and saw me as that solution. But what this family also didn't realize was the enormous amount of responsibility and privilege that it is to bring young child, baby or not, older children, older kids, infants, whatever. It's a huge responsibility and it's a huge privilege that needs to be taken very, very seriously before these steps are taken. But, they weren't, I don't think they were fully educated on what it meant, right? To bring in a child, especially with my background that had been relinquished, abandoned, lived orphanage life and had all of those traumas. And after about 2 years, they decided that I was not the kid for them. And they never formally went through with the adoption. And I remember, being about a 7-year-old kid. And that's kind of the irony of my story. I don't really know. Everything about me is made up. So my age, my name, my birthday, all this stuff is all made up. I don't actually know my origins. So, all I can do is approximate. And so when I was about 7 years old, I just remember them sitting me down in their bedroom, sitting me down on their bed, and they were standing over me and they said, "Look, you're a bad kid. We don't want you anymore. We can't have you in this family." And it's unfortunately the words and the experience that tons of kids in the child welfare system experience here in the United States. I'm not the first one, and I'm certainly not the last. And especially older kids, right, that come with a little more trauma, a little more baggage, some history, real history. I lived a whole different life before I came into their family. And so, it makes sense that they weren't fully prepared. And it makes sense, right, that they didn't think they could handle it. And so they relinquished me. And I was put into the foster care system 2 days after that. The social worker came, took me away. I drove off. I remember just looking in the rearview mirror at them, at the family, as they were watching me leave. And the social worker was in the middle of telling me, like, oh, this is good for me. I'm going to be placed into a different home. That's better. And I'll have, more fun because I'll have more siblings, just all that. I'm like, I was just told that I'm like not a good kid and I'm not wanted. It was extremely traumatic, but it just is the, experience of so many with my lived experience as, being relinquished and put into the foster system. And so, yeah, I went to a different family. They had a whole bunch of kids that were adopted slash being fostered currently. And that family grew to about 20 during my duration. And it was a whole mix of kids of color, of white kids that were either, again, adopted or in foster care in that home. And it was a really interesting and unique experience because not only was the family gigantic, it was very big. The parents were white. The home I was placed in was in a predominantly white community, in a white neighborhood. All of the people around us were white. We were an anomaly for sure. We stood out. We really, really stood out because there were so many people of color in this family, but we clearly were the oddballs. And so lots and lots of, racism happened, lots and lots of derogatory comments and just, biased comments and just ignorance. All of us lived through that growing up there. And, I like to really believe, right, that the parents of that family that took on all those kids, right, they had good intentions. I think a lot of families do when they start this adoption or foster journey, but good intentions are never enough because it takes so much work. It takes so much individualized attention and support when you're adopting or fostering, just like if you're birthing your own child. And, the system, especially back then, was not great about support for either families or for the kids themselves in the system. And, unfortunately, the placement was not great. And I really struggled in that family. I struggled in that community. I just struggled. And a lot of my foster and adoptive siblings did as well. And I ended up leaving that home at 17 and just kind of making my way in the world. And it was just it's kind of a blur now. And I have a great partner now. We've been married for over 10 years. We've been together for oh wow, like 18 years, a long time. And he's just watched me go through all the highs and lows of just that family experience. He met me after I'd left that family. But he watched my struggle, and he looks at me now and he's just like, man, I don't know how you did that. And I'm like, honey, when you are put into that situation that you did not ask for, you have no control over, you're a person of color in a community that doesn't reflect you or accept you or respect you, you just do. There's no like, we don't sit there like, oh, how am I going to do it? No, you just do. You put everything aside, you have tunnel vision, and it's survival mode. And I know that so many people, regardless if they've been in the child welfare system or not, if you're a person of color with that kind of experience of, you understand what it's like to be othered and to have less opportunity, right? Because of what you look like or where you might come from, if you're an immigrant, whatnot. We all have that shared experience of just, we need to survive. We have no choice. And that's like what I did for like 10 years. And I was in Minnesota for like 10 years, just on survival mode, trying to figure it out, taking any job that I could, I was really fortunate enough to have had the access to white privilege that I did, because I had education, right? I graduated high school. I understood the value of education. That was made very clear to me. I had access to that education. So I understood college was something that was going to be very important for me. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I found a way, right? And I did community college and then state college. And, it took me like 9 years to get my undergrad degree. And I just figured it out along the way, but I had to do it on my own. And not that I had to, right? I'm sure there were plenty of people that would have wanted to support me, but I was alone without support, without a support system. So I didn't even know how to ask for help or where to find the help. I just had to do, right? Because I had to feed myself. I had to make sure I could pay rent, which I sometimes didn't do, right? I often had to choose between filling up my tank with gas to get to work, or was I going to pay the landlord on time? Like I had to make choices like that all the time. It was really, really hard navigating through that. But because of the access to white privilege that I had, I was able to talk the talk. I was able to model the behavior. I understood like the societal expectations and norms, like what I was expected to sound like and look like and talk like and behave like. And I also perceive myself as part of white America, white society. And I'm Asian American. I'm not dark skinned. So there is a certain acceptance, right, of me to a point, right? I wasn't as threatening, right? That I saw some of my Black siblings and brown siblings experience, they were perceived as threatening, right, to society, whereas I didn't always get that kind of behavior towards myself. And so, that kind of proximity to white privilege really helped me be able to navigate these things all on my own. And I ended up having just some really incredible people in the corporate space where they gave me my first opportunity. So I worked in hospitality, in events and hotels, then found my way into like corporate sales in manufacturing, which is really big in Minnesota, actually. And then I transitioned to the nonprofit space after I graduated from the University of Minnesota to Washington, D.C. here to do nonprofit work because I wanted to change the world. And if you look at, my resume, like on paper, it looked like I had great opportunity, but I forced those opportunities. I made those things happen. And I had a help along the way with people that gave me those chances, right, when I reached for them. And I'm now a graduate. I have an MBA at NYU, which I'm really, really proud of. I graduated in 2021, which was an amazing experience. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have been able to be a part of an institution like that. But I'm also like, damn straight, you want people like me in your program because we have this perspective that your normal typical avatar of student doesn't have. Like they don't, you don't meet everybody you don't meet everyone every day that struggles in that specific way or has been through the child welfare system like that or has had to navigate this weird in between world of not being white enough yet not being Asian enough and not really not being fully sure on like how to navigate race conversations and belonging conversations because of just the societal narratives of what adoptees are and what fosters are and how we're supposed to show up in the world and all this kind of stuff. And so, I know my background is a big reason why I got into that program. And I'm really, really glad and happy that they invited me into their institution. But it just goes to show, I think, right, that, someone like me shouldn't be an exception. Like there should be me's all over the place. Like what is going on? Why is this not happening? And again, it goes back to like access to opportunity, access to privilege. And, I had my highest paying job ever in the nonprofit space. I was the head of fundraising for a national organization. It was really cool. I was like, wow. I thought I was like, I made it. I made it. I made it. I made it. I had just become a new mom. And yeah, again, on paper, it just looked like I had just like, I reached, I just, I couldn't believe it. I had to pinch myself all the time. And then at the same time, I was seeing the structural inequities time and time and time again from, I mean, I say this in just like honoring truth, right? So in philanthropy, in the nonprofit sector, even in, the DEI sectors, like there is so much structural inequity for people with these marginalized identities that, yeah, there's so much good being done on one hand, but then you see how it's funded and why it's funded and who gets funded and for how long do they get funded and what are the outcomes that are measured, why all of that is wrapped up right in donor interests, in big philanthropy interests, and nonprofits. We all have to play the game to get to survive year after year. And it was crushing me. It was crushing me to have um, to reinforce that system over and over and over again through the relationships that I built, through, what I would put in proposals, how I would craft the narrative. It just killed me. I was like, why? And so, through that experience of being a nonprofit leader and having the experience of reaching goals that I had wanted to reach, but then at the same time, understanding my background and what it took for me to get there and knowing just how much of a battle and how much more of a climb it was for someone like me to reach my position. I was like, this is not cool. I cannot stand around and just watch this anymore. And I know that there is so many just gigantic, enormous issues in our society in this area of human rights and equity and all this stuff. But what is it that I can do with my lived experience, with my skills, my expertise, my passion? Like, what do I really, really, really know? Where I know I can build a movement and move the needle a little bit and create some change, even if it's just for a small pocket of people. And I saw, right, in having served so many under-resourced communities through nonprofit work, I didn't see support systems for people like with my lived experience. And we all know like the astounding statistics of foster care in the United States. There's about 400,000 foster youth in the United States alone every single year. 20,000 age out every single year in the United States, which means they're never placed into homes. They don't really have resources or support systems or, anything when they age out. And it's like, okay, bye. We kept you alive till you were 18 or 20 and okay, you're good now. That's so not true, right? We are whole people for many, many years, way beyond 18. And as an adoptee, right, I knew that I had a really bad adoption experience, 2 adoption experiences really bad, and there weren't support systems for that. And I knew all of this had affected my career trajectory. My professional opportunities were already in motion for me when I was at a very young age, starting out my career, quote unquote, doing paper routes, then working at McDonald's. I had to pay for my own things. I went to a quote unquote private high school, but it was a religious high school. It wasn't like a fancy institution. I had to pay tuition because it was a Christian high school, but I couldn't go unless I paid for myself. The irony, right? So I was working at McDonald's to pay that tuition. Like it just was these things had set up my future kind of, right? And so from there, I was building skills in hospitality and sales, right? Which led me to my hospitality career. then my sales career. Like, and that was like my kind of trajectory. That was the path was being laid as my life unfolded, if that makes sense. And because I didn't have the personal support, let alone professional support, I didn't, all I did was follow that road, that wherever it was taking me. I didn't know to step back and look back or look around. I didn't know to think bigger or reach bigger. I just took opportunities that would pay the bills. That was it. And so my career was definitely set back, even though I quote unquote made it. I had seen a lot of my peers and colleagues make it at a much younger age than me, sitting at my same tables with my same salary. I'm like, and it took me an MBA from NYU to get there. It's like, this is no, right? So all that to say, right? I knew all of this context, right? I had lived it, literally lived it, and I didn't see resources for people with my lived experience, who are people of color or who come from, you know, just low income backgrounds, going through the foster care system. And I'm like, no, no, no. We need a way, a platform, tools, resources, for us to wealth build and wealth build earlier, but B, to have a place where we belong. We never can belong anywhere. Being an adoptee or being a foster, it means like you don't feel belonging anywhere because you're literally not a biological part of your family. You're already an outsider from the day you enter that family. So we needed that. And for people like me, I wanted to help younger people. That was me 15 years ago, that needed someone like me that had been there, done that, understood what it meant to be a foster or an adoptee with a bad adoption, and give advice, support, give a roadmap, just visibility too, right? Like, I made it. You can make it. You can do it. But you definitely can't do it alone. And so I created the Inclusion Initiative to be that platform, that resource, the support system, the network with a focus on wealth building, career building, and professional development. And so that's my story.
There is so much. The piece that I didn't tell you when we were talking earlier is that I was on the board of an organization called Inspire Life Skills in Southern California. And what it does is it works with youth who have aged out of the foster care system. So as soon as they age out, they can get involved with Inspire Life Skills. And there are things that the organization does to help them on that path. But the fact that you didn't have that and you're still where you are is truly amazing, which takes me to my next point. And that, again, my great aunt Edna is about leadership. And many of the conversations that I've had with other leaders is leadership innate or is leadership developed?
Mm.
Your situation, your story, first of all, magnificent story, but it had to be innate. You said you watched and you observed some things that were happening in the culture that you were involved with, but what you never did tell me was that there was someone who mentored or led you to the point where now you're a co-founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative, which I think is magnificent. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how do you think that fire, that leadership fire within you got to the point where you're like, okay, enough of this. I need to take the lead in this particular area?
Yeah, I think it's so funny because that goes to the question of nature versus nurture too, right? Which a lot of adoptees and fosters, we talk about a lot. We ruminate on that a lot. And I think it's both. I think I had leadership tendencies. I've always been just fearless, like unafraid to go for it. I think some of that, though, was trauma response to what I had been through. Because if I didn't keep moving, it was like do or just wither. And, when you're placed in home after home and told multiple times you're not wanted and you're, like pushed out of it's just these types of things really, at least for me, made me more fearless, almost like a protective mechanism. And, when I got to the nonprofit space, so in corporate, I crushed it. I would crush goals. I was getting promotions and raises. And I was like, yeah, this is great. Let me switch to the nonprofit world. And I'm sure it's going to be the same. And they took one look at me entering as this like on fire salesperson. They're like, what do we do with you? Like, we don't understand. Like, guys, fundraising is sales. Come on. Like, how do you not know this? But I just was misunderstood in the nonprofit sector. Plus being an Asian woman, there's a lot of stereotypes and biases that come with that from an external eye, right? I'm expected to be timid and quiet and obedient and a workhorse, but not opinionated, all these things, right? And I was the complete opposite of that. So I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including white leadership, right? I butted heads a lot with white leadership. And because I was so good at my job, but also so determined to climb the ladder and prove that I was a leader.
Yeah.
Just like I was trying to prove that I belonged in these homes, right? Prove that I was worthy of being on this earth, prove that I was valuable enough to have been adopted and have been taken out of the orphanage and have been given an opportunity here in the States. The you should be grateful narrative is pounded over and over and over again into adoptees and fosters. You should be grateful. What are you doing asking for more? No, you should be grateful that this family thought enough of you to quote unquote save you. So like that kind of rhetoric is always living in our heads, and it really drives for a lot of us this determination to rise and prove ourselves worthy, which can be really, really good for our careers up to a certain point. And it was really, really good for my career up to a certain point.
Up to a certain point.
Until I was like, okay, I'm ready for these leadership positions. Come on. Like, why is this so hard for me to obtain? What's wrong with me? Right. Then I was always asking that. What can I do better? So I would be better, hit bigger goals, do all the things, come in at 7, leave at 10 p.m. Like ridiculous things. And in the nonprofit world, they will take advantage of that because I mean, we're under-resourced all the time. Everyone is wearing multiple hats anyway. And so if you have a worker like me coming in and willing to do that, I was a golden child, except not leadership material, right? Because I didn't understand boundaries. I didn't understand how to value myself. And I thought that them allowing me to do that and giving me accolades for that, I thought that was showing me that I was valuable. When really it was showing them that I could be taken advantage of.
Yes.
And so when I was trying to hit these leadership positions, going to grad school was kind of the final test. I was like, okay, if I go to somewhere like NYU and get an MBA, damn straight, they're going to like freaking finally realize like I am the leadership material. Because I was reaching for chief development officer jobs, and I was not able to like just get over that hump. And I was like, why is this? Right. So I thought this MBA would do it. No, it didn't. And it's because I didn't understand that wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't me. The problem was the system, the racist structures, the racist narratives and norms that infiltrates many, 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 many organizations, even if you're one doing good. And so that is kind of what led me to really take on a full-on just a leadership position, like founding a company and being the leader of it. Was, again, if someone with my proximity to white privilege, and if someone like me who is not a dark-skinned person of color, like I have privilege being an Asian American, And if
Yeah.
it's this hard for me, like, what the heck are all these other people that I know struggle who are people of color? I have foster siblings, adopted siblings who are Black and brown that are struggling. I'm like, what are they supposed to do if I
Yeah.
can't even do it? Like, where are these resources? Where are these support systems? And to answer your question about mentors, no, we didn't have any because people were not able to understand me or relate to me because my lived experience was something they just could not grasp, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
understood it was a interesting story, an interesting experience, but they have no clue what it meant to be someone like me and having achieved what I did and what that took. So, like, I didn't have real mentors in my life that could help me navigate all these things and teach me, like, boundary setting and you bring value, right? Because you're a human being. You're not bringing value because you're overworking yourself. These kinds of things. I will say I had um, one manager, my very first nonprofit job. She was a transracial adoptee, just like me, and
Oh,
she
wow.
was a Black woman. Yep.
Mhm.
And it was the first time I'd ever worked with someone like that, let alone had a boss like that. Sadly, I didn't get to keep her for very long. I worked with her for just under 2 years.
Mhm.
But, she was the closest thing to a mentor that I had because we shared lived experience. We connected on that level. And she saw my potential and fostered it versus taking advantage of it. Do you know what I mean? And, but no, I never got anyone like that ever again. And I really, really needed it as I was trying to climb the ladder. I
Mhm.
really, really needed a mentor, a sponsor, right? But because I was not relatable,
Mhm.
right? Like people liked me, I was well liked, but I was not relatable. And I think people were a little scared of me, right? Because I was so determined, I was so motivated. I was always like knocking goals out of the park and all this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was hard to really form those professional, deep connections that you really need to have a mentor or like a sponsor to help you reach career goals. And so, again, right, I saw that gap, and it's part of why the Inclusion Initiative was born.
So, talk to me about the inclusion initiative. Like, someone or organization wants to interact with you. Like, what are some of the values and benefits they're going to get?
Yes. So the Inclusion Initiative, we are changing the future of work for adoptees of color and fosters as well. And so this platform really is for, anyone 18 plus that's on their professional journey that A, wants community, B, wants a sense of belonging, C wants representation and visibility of their adoptee and foster identity in the workplace, right? How often do you see a Fortune 500 CEO touted because he's an adoptee or he's a foster? You
Yeah,
don't see
I
that.
don't. I don't think I have.
Right. And so, our community is full of people, professionals at all levels. I have executives and founders, I have people just starting in their career, but everybody is either an adoptee or a foster or both, like me. And so it gives you visibility into just what we can be. Like it's a representation of who we are in the world, right? We are all these things. We're not I think society sees adoptees and fosters still as like kids in the system or kids in the home. And they don't realize that we grow up,
Yes.
we have
Yes.
careers, we get
Yes.
married, we have children, we have grandchildren, like we need support and community and all these things throughout our whole lives, not just until we're 18 years old. And so, the platform is really a place for like visibility and representation. But
Mhm.
then we also provide professional development. So there is career development and career opportunities. There's also skill building resources, and there's an opportunity to connect with mentors that have your lived experience. And so people that want to work with the Inclusion Initiative, those are just some of the benefits that you get.
Nice. So, in wrapping up, one other thing that I wanted to talk about is I know you have a new podcast, and I've seen an episode or two, but just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, or tell the audience a little bit about that. Like, what's your podcast about? What are you trying to accomplish with it?
Yeah, the podcast really is to help our community of professionals who have lived experience as adoptees and as fosters who identify that way. It's to help us like reclaim our narratives and our stories, but also to help show society, right, what our stories are from our own words and
I like it.
how we perceive ourselves and how we want them to perceive us, right? We are whole people. We want them to hear what it's like to walk through these identities, as these intersectional identities, as adoptees, as fosters, as people of color, as immigrants, as people that have experienced poverty or homelessness sometimes, right? Like these kinds of things, like it's so intersectional, it's all intertwined. And we want society to hear that from us and
Yeah.
learn from us, right? And hopefully that can help shape, better inform and shape how society talks about adoption, how society talks about the child welfare system and foster care, and that it's not this fairy tale story. It's not family rescues child, the end. No. It's family decides to bring this child who's had a traumatic experience of relinquishment, possibly abandonment, or whatever the cause, into their home, and it's a complicated lifelong journey, but always right with acceptance, respect, and love for that person as an individual and not that person as the completing of the family.
Yes.
So, and that's often what adoptees and fosters struggle with. We're often the means to an end and not looked at as like our own people, like our own individual people. And so we struggle with identity, especially in our young adulthood. And the podcast really is just to help inform like how diverse, how rich our stories are, and hearing it from our own perspectives so that we can change the future of not only us, but future adoptees.
Well, Grace, lastly, I know that you're a featured speaker. So how can people reach out to you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. My LinkedIn platform, I love hearing from people on it. I create a lot of content on LinkedIn, so please follow me at Grace Young Foster. And you can go to theinclusioninitiative.com, and there's a contact form. Reach out to me that way. Yes, would love to speak at your company, do a workshop on belonging or identities, but also would love to speak to your community of adoptees and fosters and also parents and potential parents, and help everyone just learn more about how you can be better allies and support systems to our community.
Well, Grace, thank you so much. For those of you watching, we're going to put her information up on the screen before we wrap up. But this has been a great dialogue. Pleasure to meet you again. We have so much in common. Minnesota, go Gophers. Here now in the DC area. I don't know if you're about the Commanders or Ravens, but I'm on the Ravens side of things. But
yes, you are.
I do want to again say thank you, everyone out there. Make sure you reach out to her, follow her story. It's an amazing story, and she's made that transition into leadership, which I think is phenomenal. Also, like and subscribe to our channel, My Great Aunt Edna. You can also reach out to mygreatauntedna.com. A lot of information there. So with that, I want to say thank you. May your week be excellent, and God bless.
Thank you, Mac.